Hey everyone, this is Jim with Buche Realty and Straight Up San Diego. Now I've had a lot of fun in the past few episodes showing you guys some of the cool parts of San Diego and Encinitas, and we're going to have a lot more of those episodes to come because they're just fun to do. But now I want to kick off a new informational series of episodes all about the nuts and bolts of real estate transactions in California. This is something I promised to do in the very first episode of Straight Up San Diego, so it's time to get the ball rolling. As a first episode, I want to give a very broad overview of the California home sales process. It's a huge topic and a lot to cover, but as mentioned in my very first episode, I want to do my best to keep these episodes short, sweet, and to the point, so they're really informative for you. So let's get started. In California, the players are as follows: buyers, sellers, agents, the lender, title, and escrow. All of these players have an important role, but let's start with buyers and sellers as they are probably most familiar. Buyers, you know who you are, and you've likely been poring over Zillow or Realtor.com or one of those websites looking at homes that you think you might want to buy. And if you've done a little more research, you've probably already gotten a pre-approval from a lender. In San Diego, that's an absolute must if you want to stand a chance of getting a new home. Sellers, you may be thinking about selling your house, and you've probably looked at what other houses have gone for in the neighborhood. Again, with Zillow, Realtor, and those other websites like that. And you've probably talked to your neighbors as well, so I'm sure you've kept an eye on it. You may have even come up with a price that you think you want to sell your home for, and if you have an agent, I'm sure you've talked to them about that. If you have an agent, you've also probably already signed a listing agreement, which is the contract that gives that realtor the right to sell your house and that lays out the agency terms. Which brings us to agents. Think expertise in marketing, pricing, neighborhoods, contracts, oversight of those California sale requirements, and there are plenty. The list goes on and on, but in short, it's all the things that need to get done to bring buyers and sellers together and get the deal done right. It's a lot of hats. Next up is the lender. They get the funds for the buyers, and of course, they are absolutely critical to the process. Title comes next. They ensure that the ownership transfer is clear. And finally, escrow, one of my very favorite players, because escrow is a neutral third party that handles the money, the title transfers, recordation, and essentially they make the handoff from the seller to the new owner. So we've got all these players in the transaction, but let's go to the beginning. Now, this is where the seller and the buyer have finally come together. The listing agent has marketed the home, the buyer found it, the stars have aligned, everything's come together. What now? Well, it's offer time. So the offer itself is really just a proposed contract for the sale. In the vast majority of home sales in California, what is used is the California Association of Realtors Residential Purchase Agreement and Joint Escrow Instructions. It's a mouthful, it's a long name, so we just call it the offer or the contract or usually the RPA. It's a 10-page document that any good realtor should know back and forth. It contains all the basic provisions of the sale, such as price and financing terms, length of the contract, basically everything needed to sell the house. Now, you and your realtor are going to go back and forth with the other party to reach an agreement of all those terms that are in the RPA. Once it's accepted and everybody has signed on the dotted line, you're going to do what is called going into escrow. So, what is escrow? As mentioned earlier, it's simply a third-party neutral used to facilitate the transaction, like exchanging the money, making the handoff, as I said. More generally, though, people say that you're in escrow when you're in the process of the sale. That usually takes around 30 days, and that's even during COVID-19, despite what you may have heard. Things happen pretty quickly even still. Now, at the end of it, when escrow closes and the new ownership is filed with the county, aka recorded, that's when the sale is considered officially complete. Quite a few things happen when you're in escrow, and this is the meat and potatoes of the transaction. First, the buyer is going to put down a deposit, the earnest money deposit or initial deposit, to show that they're serious about purchasing the home and they actually have some skin in the game. That earnest money deposit is usually between 1% and 3% of the purchase price. After the earnest money deposit is submitted, for most transactions, the top 3 things to follow are the inspection, the appraisal, and the loan. During the inspection period, there will be a series of required seller disclosures. They're Civil Code 1102. So they're required under that code, and they're about the condition of the home and other matters related to the property, like HOA information and title questions. The buyer will have the opportunity to make inspections of the property and even request that repairs be done or concessions be made by the seller based on what they find in the inspection. They could find a hole in the roof, and so they could ask for that to be repaired. Sometimes this may feel like there are actually 2 negotiations going on, one for the initial offer and another related to the inspection period. Simultaneously, the lender will be putting together all the loan documents as well as ordering an appraisal of the home's value to make sure it's worth enough to secure their loan on the property. Now, you'll hear a lot about a home appraising, and that's an important piece of the puzzle so that the loan can go through. So now we have the inspection, the appraisal, and the loan. Those are all contingencies, and when all 3 of these things are satisfactory, the buyer does what is called removing contingencies. Essentially, they sign a document that approves those 3 matters. Now, once all the contingencies are removed in that fashion, the buyer is then fully locked into the contract. Of course, there can be other contingencies like the sale of the buyer's home, for example, or the seller finding a new home, but this is the general process for most sales. Once all contingencies have been removed, the contract needs to move forward. If for some reason the buyer backs out at that point, they could potentially lose their deposit, that 1% to 3% earnest money. But let's hope that's not what happens, and that everybody's happy, everybody wants to move forward with the transaction. Here we are now finally at the last days of escrow, and there's going to be a flurry of documents going back and forth. There's going to be signatures, some notarized, some not, and then of course, the buyer's going to have to put down any remaining deposit that may be owed, so that usually comes as a wire transfer. Meanwhile, the lender is going to be looking for a final clear to close from the underwriting. Once that's done, the lender will fund the transaction, the deed will be recorded, and finally, the keys will be handed over to the new owner. And that's the deal. That is the basics of a California residential purchase. As you can see, there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of parties involved in buying or selling a home. With all of those things going on, things can and do sometimes get a little bit complicated and speed bumps can occur. So it takes a really great team with a lot of experience to make sure that everything goes smoothly from start to finish. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll try to get to those and get you some answers. Also, if there are any specific topics you'd like to see covered in the future, just let me know. Thanks for watching and be sure to subscribe below. I'll see you next time on Straight Up San Diego.